You ever feel the floor vanish under you while you're still standing on it? That was me, 40 minutes after closing a deal that should have secured my seat for the next decade. 18% profit margin increase. That's not a win. That's a legacy. Or so I thought. Right up until the rug was yanked out from under me and the person yanking it, my sister. My name is Gavin Langham. I'm 39 years old, or was when this all started. I was the vice president of operations at Langham Life Sciences, the pharmaceutical supply company my grandfather built out of a garage lab in Detroit. It became a national empire, and it was supposed to stay in the family. Keyword, family. The kind that stabs you in the chest while smiling for the boardroom camera. That morning started normal enough. I was sitting in my corner office, skyline view to the west, drafting the final logistics report on the Northeast Distribution Initiative. It had taken a year to renegotiate those shipping contracts, and I'd finally cracked the bottlenecks our field reps had been complaining about for 2 quarters. I was proud. Hell, I even allowed myself a rare smile when the analytics came back glowing. Dad would have been impressed, or maybe not. He'd been distant lately, quiet, distracted. My assistant buzzed in. "Gavin, the board's requesting your presence. Conference room A, now." That should have been a win. It felt like a win. I straightened my tie, brushed a stray thread from my jacket, and walked in like a man about to be congratulated. I opened the door and saw her already at the head of the table, Clarissa. She was sitting in Dad's chair. The directors were tense, avoiding eye contact, no pleasantries, just sterile silence. Then she stood. Effective immediately, I've been appointed president of Langham Life Sciences. My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. Dad wasn't in the room. She didn't pause to let it land. And as my first order of business, I'm restructuring executive operations. "Gavin, your position is being dissolved." I blinked, thought I misheard. "Dissolved? You were never meant to run a company, little brother." Her smile was sharp, practiced. "Your operations, tactics, not vision." I scanned the room, no support, no resistance, just silent approval. Security appeared behind me like clockwork. My voice stayed even, too even. "Does Dad know about this?" Her gaze was ice. "Dad's health is fragile. He's stepping back. Indefinitely." I wanted to say more, to ask what she'd done, what pressure she'd applied, but my pride walked me out before I could sink to begging for scraps. I gathered what little I had left, just my phone, the pen our father gave me on my promotion to vice president. Brass, heavy, with our company crest engraved at the clip. It used to mean something. Now it felt like a relic. The hallways felt longer on the way out, glass panels like mirrors reflecting my humiliation, back at me with every step. I didn't stop to say goodbye. Didn't need to. Word travels faster than any walk of shame. I knew the story would spread before I hit the elevator. I kept my eyes forward until the doors closed. I exhaled, hard. My whole chest tightened. That's when I noticed him, Colin, junior analyst, young kid, maybe 24, usually glued to spreadsheets. He stepped forward just before the doors opened to the lobby and pressed something into my palm, a flash drive. He leaned in. "You didn't deserve this. You should see what she did to get that chair." The doors slid open before I could react. He was gone. I stepped out onto the marble floor of the lobby I helped redesign 3 years ago during renovations. My face was still on the leadership wall, probably not for long. Outside, the wind was cruel. A late autumn sting whipped through my suit as I crossed the plaza to the parking structure. I didn't cry, didn't scream, just kept walking like it wasn't my whole career unraveling 1 minute at a time. I reached my car, a company lease. Guess that was hers now too. I sat behind the wheel, gripping the flash drive like it might bite. I hadn't even looked at it, didn't know if it held answers or distractions. All I knew was that Colin, quiet, forgettable Colin, had risked something to give it to me. I looked up at the building one last time. My office lights were already off, like I'd never been there. And suddenly I wasn't just angry, I was curious. Curious enough to turn the ignition and drive, not home, but somewhere I could find out what was so dangerous that Clarissa needed me gone. Because if she thought I'd vanish quietly, she forgot who taught her how to fight. I didn't sleep the night she fired me, not really. I laid on my couch in my apartment, too wired to rest, too numb to scream. The pen she hadn't taken sat on the coffee table in front of me, and next to it, the flash drive Colin had pressed into my hand like it held a cure or a curse. At 3:17 a.m., I gave in, plugged it into my personal laptop, and opened the single folder inside. For GL, they'll cover it if you don't. Inside were documents, dozens, memos, spreadsheets, compliance review logs, performance audits, only they weren't real. Or rather, they were real, but they didn't match the files I knew. These were doctored, inflated margin reports, compliance sign-offs on projects that hadn't even launched yet, contracts backdated to fit fiscal windows. The watermark on one read, Final Q3 Submission, in a file dated 2 weeks before the actual quarter ended. This wasn't carelessness. It was strategy. I stayed up until the sun came up, toggling between disbelief and rising heat in my chest. Clarissa hadn't just gotten the seat. She engineered the path, and no one questioned it because she had made it look perfect. The golden girl, visionary, untouchable. I needed more. I wasn't about to go on some crusade over doctored PDFs. Not yet. I needed someone who could confirm what I was seeing wasn't just incompetence, it was deliberate. So I reached out to someone who vanished right before the puzzle started forming. Michelle Dane, our former chief financial officer. The one who left for family reasons 3 months ago. That never sat right with me. Michelle had been colder than Clarissa, but sharp as a scalpel. She didn't make mistakes, and she didn't walk unless someone opened the door for her, and pushed. It took me a day to find her. She was consulting now. Independent, low profile. We met at a co-working space near the river. She wore sunglasses inside. Paranoid or smart? I couldn't tell the difference anymore. She didn't offer a greeting, just dropped her bag and said, "You've seen it, haven't you?" I nodded. Then you already know she cooked the books. The performance metrics weren't enough. She needed to show transformation, quarter-over-quarter improvement that didn't exist. I leaned forward. "Why didn't you say something?" "I did, privately. To your father." A week later, I was given a very generous severance package and a scripted exit story. He was tired, worn down, and scared of another scandal. I swallowed. Did she threaten him? I think she just outmaneuvered him. She knew where the bodies were buried, financially speaking. Then she dropped a name I hadn't heard before. Medion Health Partners. That's where the real theft is hiding. I blinked. Who? She opened her laptop and pulled up a screenshot. Supposed European acquisition. On paper, it's a supply chain tech partner based in Zurich. In reality, it doesn't exist. It's a shell Clarissa built to route funding from R&D into campaign promises. New labs, expanded distribution, marketing blitzes, all funded with stolen innovation capital. She slid the image toward me. But I couldn't prove it without access to the source server. I tapped the flash drive. What if I could get you that access? Michelle stared at me. Then you better find the right ghost. That night, I went hunting for ghosts, and I found one. Lisa Bray, our former IT director, quiet, brilliant, and, until now, missing. She'd left 6 months ago under amicable terms, which I now understood meant strategic silence. I tracked her down through an old internal Slack archive I still had access to. Her last message was a simple, out of office permanently. Good luck. She agreed to meet, but only in person. Neutral ground. We chose a bar downtown. Dark wood, quiet booths, no cameras. Lisa walked in wearing a hoodie and a scowl. "You're late," she said, sliding into the booth. I nodded toward her bag. "You brought it?" She pulled out a thin hard drive. "This is the server backup they thought they deleted. Your sister's team was sloppy, arrogant, thought if they scrubbed the active logs, it was gone forever." I stared at it. "Why give this to me?" Lisa leaned in. "Because Clarissa doesn't scare me. But what she's doing, it's criminal, and I'm tired of pretending it's not." I took the drive like it was wired to explode. "You didn't hear this from me," she said, standing to leave. I didn't stop her. I just sat there in the booth, holding the evidence that could unravel everything. Back at my apartment, I plugged it in and began digging. Folders, logs, directories. Then I found them. 3 transfers routed through a Swiss IP, masked under the alias MH Partners Zurich. Amounts in the 7 figures. Receivers, untraceable. I ran a cross-check with the EU corporate registry. Median Health Partners didn't exist. Not legally, not officially, but Clarissa's presidency? Yeah, it was built on top of it. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. 5 days without shaving, eyes sunken, bloodshot. My desk was a battlefield. Coffee-stained printouts, uncapped highlighters, legal pads covered in timelines and arrows. I lived inside the case now. I breathed it. Ate nothing but adrenaline and instant noodles. Clarissa had built a paper empire, and I was going to burn it down sheet by sheet. The hard drive from Lisa was the match. Michelle and I built out the trail. I knew the numbers. I'd lived in spreadsheets for 10 years. But Michelle saw what I couldn't. She spotted the coded transfers, the way Clarissa nested transactions under R&D expense forecasts, and overseas strategic partnerships. But there were no labs in Zurich, no satellite facilities, just a dummy address linked to an offshore account routed through Cyprus, then Luxembourg, then gone. Clarissa hadn't just stolen money, she'd bought power with it. We mapped out every move, first the offshore funnel, then the inflated quarterly growth numbers, designed to impress key shareholders. She spun a narrative of visionary growth, tech reinvention, market domination. But it was all funded by lies. Then came the board votes. 2 directors who had resisted Dad's conservative leadership suddenly flipped and voted Clarissa in. Michelle ran their personal investment accounts through a public disclosures database. Both had recent stakes in a new European healthcare venture. Median Health Partners. Of course, it wasn't bribery, it was investment. Legal, if you squint hard enough and bury the ethics. The hardest piece to swallow came next. My father. At first I thought he was a casualty, a loyal founder pushed out by modern wolves. But the truth was colder. Clarissa hadn't just taken the throne, she'd leveraged it from him. A quiet note buried in our forensic archive revealed a closed internal audit from 1996. Minor accounting irregularities. Nothing jail-worthy, but embarrassing. Potentially reputation-destroying in the wrong hands. She'd found it, and she used it. Dad didn't retire, he surrendered. That broke something in me. I spent a whole night just staring at a whiteboard, watching Clarissa's scheme take shape in red marker. Fraud, leverage, control. She hadn't stumbled into power. She orchestrated it. By the next morning, I had names, numbers, timelines. What I didn't have was muscle, so I called in someone who'd been through fires hotter than this. Arthur Bren, a corporate governance attorney who made a name tearing down biotech cons in the late 2000s. The kind of lawyer who didn't flinch at billion-dollar lies. We met at his office downtown. The blinds were always closed. Everything smelled like burned coffee and litigation. He listened without interrupting, flipping through my folders like he was skimming a diner menu. When I finished, he asked one question. You got the originals? I have backups, the drive, the server logs, dated email threads, 2 witnesses, one was IT, the other was the former CFO. And your sister? Smart, arrogant, reckless. He nodded once. Good. That's the kind that makes mistakes. Arthur didn't waste time. He mapped out our legal strategy like a general preparing a siege. Whistleblower protection filings, internal shareholder disclosure protocols, chain of custody validation for digital evidence. We'd need to submit everything to the company's oversight board before Clarissa could spin it as a smear campaign. If we moved first, we controlled the narrative. If. Arthur leaned back and steepled his fingers. We go public, she'll throw everything she has at you. PR, legal, private investigators, NDA breaches, character smears. You prepared for that? I looked him in the eye. I lost my job, my name, and my family's respect in a week. What else is there to lose? He smiled grimly. Your freedom. If she flips this on you, makes it look like you fabricated evidence or hacked private data. I didn't. Doesn't matter. It only matters what the board believes first. We agreed to bring Lisa and Michelle in the following day for sworn depositions. Arthur had a paralegal already prepping the secure case folders. It was happening. And still, I couldn't sleep that night. Not from doubt, from anticipation, from anger, from the pounding pulse in my temple that hadn't gone away since Clarissa smiled in my face and gutted my future. I called Lisa at 1:30 a.m. just to hear her confirm the backup's integrity. She did. I called Michelle after. She was already up, reviewing market disclosures to see who else Clarissa might have roped in. We were a skeleton crew, but we had the truth. The next morning, Arthur pulled me aside just before we began prepping the filing. He closed his office door, leaned on the edge of his desk, and said, "There's no walking it back after this." I nodded. "No negotiations? No quiet settlements? You hit that oversight board, it's scorched earth." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. He finished, "You're either the prodigal son or you're roadkill." I took a breath. Then I said, "Let's file." There's a silence that only exists the moment before detonation, not the kind you hear. No, it's what you feel. A charge in the air, a weight behind your ribs. That's what it felt like walking into the boardroom that morning, dossier in hand, every word and document ready to shatter what my sister had built. Langham Life Sciences had always run on legacy, tradition. We didn't invoke Clause 14.7 unless the ship was sinking. That clause, our failsafe, allowed any former executive with provable evidence of malfeasance to call for an emergency shareholder vote and oversight review. My father had written it into the corporate charter after a hostile acquisition attempt in '96. No one thought it would ever be used. Until now. The night before, Arthur helped finalize the submission packet. Everything. Michelle's affidavits, Lisa's recovered server logs, the offshore transfers, even Clarissa's internal emails where she mocked our father's outdated conservatism and bragged about cleaning house with just enough fog, all compiled, notarized, and distributed to every major investor and board member before dawn. When Clarissa arrived, she looked untouchable, impeccable suit, hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. A smile so polished it could have sliced marble. She didn't even glance at me as she took her seat at the head of the table. "Let's begin," she said, as if this were just another quarterly update. Then the chair of the audit committee cleared his throat. "President Langham, before we proceed, we've received an urgent submission from former Vice President Gavin Langham. Given the evidence presented and under Clause 14.7, we are required to address it." Clarissa's smile didn't falter, but her eyes twitched. Barely. "This is a distraction," she said smoothly. "A personal vendetta from someone who couldn't adapt to modern leadership." I stood. "Then let's read it all aloud." One by one, the pages turned, projected on the screen. Transfer receipts from a shell company in Zurich. Side-by-side comparisons of real and doctored performance reports. Email chains showing her pressuring staff to retroactively sign off on failed initiatives. Photos of the dummy office Medion supposedly leased in Switzerland, an empty storefront with a broken light bulb and no staff on record. Then Michelle stepped in, her voice steady, cold, professional. "As chief financial officer, I warned President Langham of these risks. I was offered severance in exchange for silence." Lisa followed. "The servers were wiped, but not thoroughly. The backups confirmed the structure of the deception." Clarissa tried to push back. "This is character assassination, unproven, circumstantial." The audit chair held up the summary affidavit. "Then perhaps the SEC will decide." That was the first real crack. Her lips pressed thin. The silence that followed wasn't fear. Not yet. It was calculation, watching gears grind as she scrambled to regain control. But control had already left the room. By noon, 2 board members publicly resigned. 3 investment firms issued temporary freezes on stock movements. Our internal comms team, loyal as ever to the company name, not her name, issued a bland but telling statement. Langham Life Sciences is conducting a full internal investigation following new disclosures. By 3 p.m., Clarissa's face hit every major business outlet. President under fire, Clarissa Langham's Zurich shell game. CNBC ran a live segment. Twitter exploded. Former employees began posting NDA-violating but cathartic stories about her tyranny. She went from respected visionary to corporate pariah in hours. And I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Just finished. I stepped out of the building, the cold wind hitting my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt clean. I went home. I didn't celebrate. No champagne, no speeches. I turned off my phone and sat on the couch with the lights off, letting silence fill the cracks her betrayal had left in me. It was nearly midnight when the knock came. I opened the door, and there she was, Clarissa. No security, no entourage, just her. She wasn't polished now. Her hair was loose, her blazer unbuttoned, heels in her hand like she'd walked barefoot half a mile. Her face looked like someone had poured cold water over it and then left her to dry. "You win," she said. Her voice was raw. I couldn't remember ever hearing it like that. I didn't say anything, just leaned against the doorframe. She looked down, then back up. "What do you want, Gavin? Name it." I stared at her for a long moment. "That's the wrong question." Her brows furrowed. "You think this was about revenge?" I said quietly. "But it wasn't. It was about truth, about Dad, about the company. You buried our name in a vault of lies and called it vision. I didn't want the throne. I just wanted it not to rot." She swallowed hard, eyes glinting with something between rage and regret. "I'll be disbarred," she said. "Or worse." "Probably." She stepped back. "You're crueler than I thought." I shook my head. "Number?" I just stopped pretending that blood excuses betrayal. Then I closed the door, not with anger, just with finality. And behind it, I breathed in a different kind of silence. Not detonation. Relief. My temporary office was on the 22nd floor of a downtown building that still smelled faintly of fresh paint and ambition. It wasn't grand, no corner windows or oil portraits on the walls, just a modest executive suite with a borrowed desk, a second-hand coffee machine, and the company crest etched into a frosted glass panel beside the door. I wasn't there to replace her. I was there to reset everything she'd broken. The board offered me the presidency within a week of Clarissa's resignation. They framed it like a reward, a natural correction. Langham blood restoring order. I declined. Not out of false modesty, and not because I lacked the ambition, because the title had become a symbol of rot. Instead, I came back to the boardroom with a proposal, a full-scale merger with Virex and Therapeutics. An ethical competitor Clarissa had once publicly mocked as slow, soft, and over-regulated. The very kind of company that cared more about patient outcomes than flashy projections. Virexan's CEO, a quiet man named Russell Shore, took my call on the first ring. He'd heard about the Zurich fallout, knew we were vulnerable, and also knew I wasn't my sister. "We're not vultures," he said, "but we don't back away from reform either." We drafted terms in 3 days. I brought the proposal to the Langham board with zero fanfare, no pitch deck, no consultants, no PR spin. Just a 2-page document that outlined cost efficiencies, expanded ethical supply chains, and a renewed focus on product transparency, real deliverables, no illusions. The board voted 9-2 in favor. Clarissa, meanwhile, issued her statement through a lawyer. She would be stepping away to focus on wellness, privacy, and personal growth. I didn't watch the press circuit. I didn't need to. Her story had already been rewritten without her consent, and this time, the pen wasn't in her hand. 2 weeks later, I stood behind a podium in a conference room filled with journalists and patient advocacy reps. No teleprompter, no speechwriter, just the truth. We are merging with Virexan to restore more than just balance sheets. We're restoring trust. I won't offer apologies for choices I didn't make, but I will offer direction. Leadership isn't a seat, it's a legacy. And mine doesn't start with betrayal, it starts with rebuilding. No applause, just silence. The kind that means people are actually listening. After that, I went quiet. No interviews, no profile spreads, no CEO comeback features. The work was quiet, and it was mine. 6 weeks later, I made a drive I hadn't made in nearly a year. Back to the family estate, where it had all begun, where it had all cracked. My father was sitting in the garden, pruning dead leaves from a potted lemon tree he'd been trying to revive since my mother passed. He didn't look surprised to see me, just nodded toward the other chair. "You did what I should have," he said, without preamble. "No," I said, sitting. "I did what you couldn't." He chuckled. It wasn't bitter, just tired. I thought keeping her close would keep the company safe. I saw her ambition, thought I could guide it, but somewhere along the way, I started mistaking silence for control. I didn't reply. We watched a bee hover over the lemon blossoms for a moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and handed me an envelope, aged, sealed, with my name written on it in his handwriting. "I drafted this the day you negotiated the Ontario supply deal," he said. "I never filed it. She was older. She wanted it more. I thought I could balance her fire with your steadiness." I turned the envelope over in my hands but didn't open it. "You were always the better choice," he said, softer now. I just didn't know how to tell her that. The sun was dipping behind the greenhouse. He went back to pruning, and I sat with the envelope until the light faded. When I got home that night, I slid it into a drawer beside the pen he gave me when I first made VP. I didn't need to read it. I'd already written my own version of it. I wasn't born to run the company. I was built by it. And now, I'm rebuilding it without blood debts or board games. Just results.